Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. I'm Justin. I'll be your host tonight, and with me this evening are Cody and Brett. And
Barely.
yeah, technical issues aside, we we should be able to slide this through to the end. But before we get to our topic for the evening, let's take a bit of time and see what we've been up to lately. It feels like it's been a while since we've all gotten together and done one of these. So, Brett, let's start with you.
Sure thing. Yeah, I actually don't recall exactly when the last episode of I was on. It has been a while. In part because I was I went on vacation with my family for a week and a half. And yeah, it was really good. We went to Universal Studios in Florida again. And primarily because the first time we went, my wife had purchased annual passes, which essentially is like you can get into the park like any day of the year for free. So you just have to like get there and then you can like get in, So she said, well, let's go one more time so we can use these passes again before they run out. So I was like, well, okay, let's go. But yeah, great trip again. We did take a detour one day to Discovery Cove, which is like an extension of SeaWorld. And I actually swam with dolphins.
Oh wow.
And nice.
The Miami Dolphins?
Yes, all of them at once. They and well, it's funny though, is that like they call it swimming with dolphins, but I mean I don't even have to exaggerate here. I rode a dolphin.
Jesus.
Dude.
It was an amazing experience to ride a dolphin. And
tell me you have a picture of you riding a dolphin.
I do. I have several.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, that trip was really great. Since I've been home, I've been just kind of like dabbling stuff in here and there. I turned on and watched a show last night. It's on Netflix, but I don't think it originated on Netflix. It's called Holy Moly, and it is this combination between the obstacle course show Wipeout, like a combination between that and mini golf. So let that sink in for a moment.
Okay.
And it's hosted by Rob Riggle and like Joe Tessitore. And it's wacky. I enjoyed it. I only watched one episode, but I enjoyed it quite a bit. I think I'm gonna keep watching that for a while to see where that goes. Nice. But it's pretty crazy. What you up to, Cody?
Hello. Well, I'm half convinced you're all figments of my imagination, but if this is a real podcast with other people, Okay. All right. No, I can do this.
Hate to break it to you, Cody. We're all AI generated.
Damn it. I knew 2023. It. No, well, I've been up to, I feel like a lot of stuff. I've been playing through GoldenEye and recording those podcast episodes. That's been an interesting voyage. So if Justin wants to hear me swear about GoldenEye quite a bit, he can listen to those on his own free time. But I did some traveling lately and I had a little bit of free time for 3, 4, 5 days, which was pretty strange. But I started watching Midnight Club on Netflix finally, and I got about 4 or 5 episodes of that before I ran out of free time again and came back to reality. And I started playing Fire Emblem Engage, so something for both of you there. I think I'm on mission 8 in Fire Emblem Engage. Played a lot of that on the plane to the West Coast and back. Nice. And one other thing is my family has started watching this fantastic show that we're all really enjoying on Netflix called Squid Game. And it is a riot. Now, actually, we are watching it for real, though. It's the, I don't know if either of you have seen, but it's the new version. Yeah, the contestant one.
The new, like, actual, like, game show thing, yeah.
The completely unself-aware one. Yeah.
It is pretty good. Like every episode they manage to produce in such a way that it's like ridiculously tense. Have you seen any of it, Brett?
I haven't, but maybe I'll check it out now.
Yeah, the kids and I and Karen are all like just like staring to see what's going to happen because you get to know some of the players, and I won't spoil anything for you, but they basically follow the Squid Game formula, but they throw some twists in there as well, and they're playing for something ridiculous, like $4.5 million, I think, is the prize for the winner of the game.
Wow. Okay.
So it's pretty crazy. It's what would that come out to? It's like I think it's $10,000 every time somebody's eliminated. They add $10,000 to the pot, so it adds up pretty quick.
Wow.
But it's actually is. I'm not being facetious. It actually is really good that we've seen so far. We're in the middle of episode 3, I think, right now. And then last big thing here I wanted to share with you guys is, as you know, I've had this. The audience doesn't know this, but I've had this land fear background for weeks and weeks and weeks since we did the Wheel of Time, and I'm ready to move on from that. Officially, I have decided.
What?
Ending my land fear crush. I'm going to put the new one up here. There we go. It's a new land fear background.
Okay.
So got that going for us as well. I told Karen I had a crush on this lady.
Cool.
She was like, how old is she? So we looked her up, and Karen's like, she's 36. That's okay. You can have a crush on her. And I was like, all right. So there we go. So
Yeah,
that's
change
all
is good.
that. Yeah, right?
Yeah.
No, I missed the other one. I'm going to switch it back. I was kidding.
Yeah, when I saw that background, I'm like, God, has it really been that long since I've been on the podcast? But no, it's just time flows differently here.
Sure does.
So, yeah, speaking of time flowing differently, if it wasn't for Thanksgiving, I would have just finished my 3rd week in a row of 6-day work weeks. So that's kind of been my life recently. People are either off for being getting to be around the holidays. One of my coworkers just had a baby, so there's that. And it's just it's been a lot. So that's part of why I haven't been on lately. That, and during my time being at work, nothing is working correctly. So it's just been kind of a dumpster fire of a work life for me. In terms of getting away from that for a bit, I've been bit by bit playing through Alan Wake 2 recently. So that's a happy thing. And that game is very good. I'm not quite sure if I would call it a game of the year contender yet, considering just how many other incredible games have come out so far this year, but it's solid. It certainly helps if you have played the first one, because there's a lot of references you might not get if you just go into it blind. But even if you haven't played the original, which I would recommend because that's also good, it's still certainly worth playing. Very atmospheric, great graphics. You never quite know who or what to believe, and I like that in a narrative. And it has one of my favorite moments in gaming of 2023, perhaps of all time.
Wow.
I don't want to say anything more than that, but it's an experience when you get to that part. So life hasn't been all bad, but I'm ready for a break.
For reference, it's been 4 weeks since Brett's been on and 5 weeks since Justin has been on.
Okay, so I can't blame all of that on work.
Yeah.
But things could always be worse, which in a roundabout way brings us to tonight's topic. So, work can be bad. You can have technical issues. You can be dealing with crap, drama behind the scenes. But at least you haven't burst into flames, unlike roughly 200 people throughout recorded history. And tonight we are talking about spontaneous human combustion, what it is, what it might be, explanations for it, and varying individual accounts of it possibly happening. So,
blame on.
So if you're not familiar with the subject, spontaneous human combustion is a phenomenon where people seemingly for no reason will just be sitting alone in a chair, in the kitchen, just anywhere, and they'll just burst into flames and usually die. Not always. There have been a few people who have survived this experience, but in general, family members or neighbors, stumble across them the next day or something, and all they find is a pile of ashes, sometimes a limb that's remained unburnt, and strangely, not a whole lot of damage to the surrounding area, usually. And this is it's been a subject that's always kind of fascinated me, because I think I first stumbled across it on Unsolved Mysteries back in the day, I want to say, and being young at the time, it's like, I was mildly terrified because I'm like, is this going to happen to me? Is there anything I can do to stop it from happening? How do I know if I'm going to burst into flames? And but it's an interesting mystery. But before we get too far in, how did you two find out about this particular subject?
I died. I burst into flame. No, actually, tangent here, but you mentioned Unsolved Mysteries, and for some reason, Robert Stack being in the movie Basketball just popped into my head as you said that, and that's still kind of surreal that he was in the movie Basketball multiple times. But anyway,
That's fair. Another mystery we could tackle sometimes. Sometime maybe like,
right?
did someone have blackmail on him? Did he really need the money? Who knows?
Illegitimate children were the stars of the movie.
What about you?
I have no idea how I heard about this first. I mean, it's just always been a fascinating idea that people can just suddenly blow up or explode or burst into flames, and kind of like the mystery of what's behind that, if it is in fact even a thing, which there's a lot of interesting, fun debate about this out there online, I will say. So
Yeah, I couldn't tell you when exactly I first heard about it. I would say it's got to be a long time ago at this point. It feels like something that I was aware of, like in my teens, at least at the very least, the term, if not specific accounts and details. But it's been a while. But I don't know when precisely.
Okay.
So
Gotcha. Well, in terms of popular culture and references to this phenomenon, it really seemed to take off kind of in the 19th century. But the first recorded a case of this was actually written down by I believe he was a physician in the 17th century, a man named Thomas Barcellinus, who wrote down a bunch of medical oddities and strange occurrences in a book that he wrote at the time. But he mentions seemingly the first recorded incidents of human combustion having taken place in the 15th century in Milan, Italy, where a knight named, apologies if I butcher the pronunciation, Polonus Vorstius was at some sort of festival, or at least, sitting down for a nice meal, and he drank either greatly to excess or slightly to excess. And as the night went on, he began, and I quote, belching fire. And in front of witnesses, he burst into flames and died. So I couldn't find out much more in terms of the details that were written down of this case, but that is, to the best of my knowledge and the best of my research, the first time it was ever recorded as something having seemingly happened to a living human being. Which means that this has been going on for a pretty long time if it's real. But it didn't really seem to garner a lot of attention, at least to Western audiences, or audiences, as if this is entertainment. But it's kind of, yeah. Until about the 19th century, including Charles Dickens mentions it in his novel Bleak House, where a character ends up dying due to spontaneous human combustion, again from drinking way too much and just igniting. And from that point onwards, there have been scattered accounts, from then until the present day, pretty much. And let's see, do we want to get into some of the better known ones first, or just kind of talk a bit more about what is involved? What would you guys prefer?
Well, I think maybe mention that general cases of this, just kind of, I won't say the science, the facts. Let's look at the facts of this, which is when these cases are reported, typically they have maybe some extremities that are left behind the scene, feet, hands, head, but the torso is usually gone. The crime, if you call it a crime scene, I guess maybe that's not even something for sure we talk about, but
we can touch on that.
Basically there's like the room is not burned, but
Sure.
the person is burned, and doesn't seem to be like a house fire, for example. This is a very different instance than that.
Okay. Sure. I can build off of that. So typically, when these cases happen, it often seems to happen when the victim is alone. not always, but frequently. That can be either, alone in the building or just alone in the room. There have been accounts where someone, had been with a different person, just within an hour of it happening. That person leaves the room, comes back in a bit later and finds the other person engulfed in flames. But generally, these incidents happen when the person's alone for whatever reason.
I also saw that
Commonality
like 90% of the cases, I think, in the last so many hundred years were right after they had been with their mother-in-law. So that was odd too, but
well, there are some other not complete commonalities, because there's outliers to all of these. But a lot of the cases do seem to involve women, particularly elderly women, particularly elderly overweight women who drink a lot. And I wish I were making this up, but I've seen in multiple bits of research and articles that I've done that seem to draw a line that encapsulates all of those things as a common factor. There are men that die from this. There are people who don't drink, people who don't smoke. But I mean, it does seem like this happens a lot to elderly women who fall into that category. Which there is, we can talk a bit about a bit more about why that might be in a bit here, but that does seem to be something that happens more often than not. Like you said, the surroundings typically are either unscathed, and this includes furniture around them, sometimes newspapers or articles of clothing that are nearby. Sometimes the things that the people were wearing are unburnt, but their bodies are scorched to pretty much ashes. There was one instance where a man's hair was intact, but the rest of him had burned away. So very odd traits for a general fire, which indicates there's something strange is going on, but the question is what? And frequently when people discover the bodies, they note a sweet smell in the air, in the smoke, which is odd for a house fire, and odd for someone burning to death. If you've ever smelled burnt hair, it smells horrible. Burnt flesh actually smells a bit more like pork more than anything. It doesn't. I wouldn't describe it as smelling sweet. I know you're going to ask me how I know this. The Cliff Notes version is fireworks accident. When I was younger, I burned myself, and I swear the smell reminded me of like pork. So read into that what you
like
will.
pork.
I was too busy running it underwater at that point to to investigate, but I wouldn't describe it as a sweet smell. So that indicates that maybe some other factors at play. We can dive into a bit of what that might be later on, but a lot of bizarre elements in terms of what you would normally see in an arson or someone burning to death under other circumstances. And let's see. It feels like well, I mean, there are of course other little bits of detail that sometimes crop up, sometimes don't. Usually, okay, well, let's just jump into the topic of the alcohol, because this does seem to be an important point for a variety of reasons. Because alcohol burns just on its own if you expose it to flame in certain conditions. So there's the theory that it can increase the flammability of the human body. Whether that holds water, no pun intended, is up for debate. But in general, it seems like these people are in a state where they might be unconscious and unable to put themselves out from fire that starts from a mundane source. And this seems to be a common criticism I see in a lot of these cases. Not all by any means, but a fair number of these people are near formerly lit cigarettes or like a candle or a fireplace. It's things that could spark and ignite them. And if they're unconscious and insensate to the world, they might not even realize they're on fire, might burn to death. But it seems to me that's a little too easy, because if you look at, say, a crematorium, those, in order to reduce bone to ashes, which is what you see in a lot of these cases. You need to reach temperatures of about 1100 degrees Fahrenheit, and you need to keep those temperatures sustained for anywhere from 3 to 4 hours generally to reduce human bone to just a granular ash. And that's a long time for a person to be, say, like sitting in a chair or lying in bed, burning consistently with A, without waking up, B, without anyone noticing, and C, without that fire spreading. And even getting to those kinds of temperatures seems like it stretches stretches credulity a bit, to me at least.
I'd say one of the most grossest facts that I found out in this case had nothing to do with the actual spontaneous combustion itself. It was the note on the crematorium burning. I found a couple different sources here. You said 11. I had some here that were like 700 to 1,000. I have one that's 14 to 1,800, but says that 2 to 3 hours it's hot enough inside to melt aluminum. But even after they cremate the bodies, apparently the large bones still don't break down from those temperatures, and somebody actually has to swim with a mallet to destroy the bones as part of the cremation process, which I just thought was the grossest thing in this whole case.
Does
See, that part I
gosh.
missed, but wow.
As I have relatives who have been cremated, I'm picturing them in a whole new light now. Like,
Likewise, yeah.
is that like the executioner who is excited to do that, or is it like they draw straws to see who crawls in and smashes stuff up
What's
today?
Does that job
What's your
even pay
job
well?
here? I'm the bone crusher.
Yeah,
You don't want to mess with that guy,
right?
but yeah, that also brings to the subject that these are intense levels of heat that you think would set other things on fire, and even if those temperatures were reached, like you said, the bone still sometimes requires extra outside forces to break down. So unless there's someone coming in after these people have burned for a couple of hours and like hitting them with a sledgehammer, it just seems very strange that there's nothing left but ashes in a lot of these cases. Granted, I'm not a forensic pathologist. Maybe there's some element here that I'm missing, but given everything that we've put together, it doesn't seem plausible to me that it's just natural causes for people burning up because they're unconscious. And hang on, Cody just shared a link. Taking a quick look at that. Oh, jeez.
Buy all kinds of stuff out there, I tell you.
Apparently you can. Yeah. So, you know what? No, I don't want this to be a sponsor. So I'm not gonna. If you wanna plug this thing, go ahead, Cody. But
no, it's a company that sells some of the instruments you can use to get a nice, fine, evenly colored and shaped granular ash for your relatives.
So, do it at your home yourself.
This really seems like something that should be regulated. So, in light of that,
there's even a mobile unit. That's
mercy. Surely these things couldn't possibly be used for foul play. but yeah. So, God. So going back to what we do know, the things that are undeniable evidence, undeniable facts. Bodies burned to ash. Extremities are sometimes, I'd almost even say often, left behind, burnt, to the point where they fall off, or the fire peters out before it gets to them. And the fact that surroundings are generally untouched is just odd. But let's dive into a few specific examples just to give you an idea of how weird this sort of thing is. So perhaps the best known case of this, at least the one that I saw cited the most when I was researching this, was a woman named Mary Reeser. She was 67 years old, a widow at the time, and this was back in 1951. So she, I believe, lived alone, though she, did see her family fairly often. I think she even saw one of her relatives the day that her unfortunate fate happened. But she was at home at the time. She had been dealing with some depression issues. She didn't like living where she did. She lived in Florida. insert your own joke here. But she wanted to basically, from what I've read, wanted to go and live closer to family, and her finances didn't quite allow for it. So she was depressed as a result of that. And she was taking sleeping pills, which I don't remember exactly the name of the chemical, but it was common at the time and also very addictive. So she may have taken more than she should have, but passed out in her chair. And her landlady actually in the night noticed a smell of smoke, or like a strange smell in the air. Went to go check on her, found that the doorknob to her apartment was hot. So she got someone to come and help her, bust in. And they found basically her remains in the chair she had been sitting in, burned to ashes. I believe only a leg was left. There was some smoke damage to the surrounding area, but there were things around her that were completely unscathed. The article I'm looking at right now mentions a pile of newspapers, nearby, within 5 to 6 feet, was completely unburned. But she was reduced entirely to ash. And she was a smoker. She was certainly dead to the world before this happened. So if she did drop a cigarette on herself and it burst into flames, she wouldn't have been in a condition to put it out. But that raises the question: why didn't the fire spread? And that's a question that keeps coming up in all of these cases. And in this particular one, I do believe the FBI even got involved in investigating it, and their results were inconclusive as well. Like how this happened, what happened, what could be done to prevent it, what was, why did it play out the way it did? As far as I've been able to find, their results were inconclusive as well. But there are dozens and dozens of cases similar to this. Let's see, John Irving Bentley was a doctor. He was less, I mean, he was able to get around, but he had to use a walker, so he wasn't terribly mobile. He died in his bathroom, burst into flames, and left again a leg behind. This fire managed to melt it or burn its way through the floor and deposit ash on the floor below where he was. But which makes it one of the more destructive cases and of this happening. But again, no immediate cause was determined in terms of like what started it, why he wasn't able to put himself out or get away. And there are just dozens and dozens of cases of people being alone and being discovered as just piles of ash. And a lot of them do seem to be centered in the U.S. Like they're from the 50s onward, there have been a lot of cases reported here, but they've also happened elsewhere and more recently since like the last century. In 2007, a Brazilian woman was this happened in front of witnesses, from what I've been able to tell. Her upper body burned. Witnesses said she appeared to have caught fire from the inside out, and she did not survive. 2010, Elizabeth McLaughlin, a woman in Ireland, burned to death inside her apartment, seemingly without cause. 2013, a man named Danny Van Zant, he completely burnt up in his home in Sequoia County. The sheriff at the time chalked it up to unknown, and he said it reminded him of spontaneous human combustion. 2015, a woman on a bench in Flensburg, Germany, burst into flames in front of witnesses. And the most recent one I was able to find, at least with any pertinent details, was in 2016. A homeless man in a doorway in Serbia seemed to just ignite from the abdomen outward in front of witnesses, again, possibly burning from within. And it's just, these things don't happen often, but there are still recorded cases of them happening more or less to the present day. The fact that no one's caught one of these on camera is, well, especially when there's been witnesses, that's a little iffy, but there are a lot of photographs, at least, of the aftermath, and and some of them are grisly. If you want to look them up, be warned, it's stuff that's not safe for work. You got limbs that are just sitting in blackened spots on the ground, and it's not for the faint of stomach. So it's a weird phenomenon, but there are. Did you have either of you have anything you wanted to comment on it as a whole before we get into possible explanations or at least theories? Some of those are even a stretch to call theories, but we'll get to that.
I think one thing that kind of stands out to me about these cases is that like all the kind of like paranormal and cryptid and like mythological kind of stuff that we've tackled in the past, and just in things in general in the world, spontaneous human combustion might have the most physical evidence to actually back it up. You know, we have photos, like lots of photographic evidence. You have all the police reports and all the other reports of people who saw these scenes, and yet it is like simultaneously like the most impossible to explain scientifically. Like even like Bigfoot, you could find possible scientific explanations, and a lot of these, it does not make any sense how that could possibly happen. Even though, I mean, we're going to talk about, you know, possible, you know, things in the just here down the road, but it's just such a crazy thing.
Yeah, I am going to share to you guys one video I found. It's not very good quality, but it is from a dash cam of a police cruiser, it appears. And I'm just going to let this play out. You tell me what you think. The people in the comments on YouTube don't exactly seem impressed or convinced, but it might be the only case I've seen where this is basically caught on video. So for you, those of you at home, it's a cop has pulled over a guy on the side of the road. He's going over to the side of the car, shining a flashlight in, talking to the guy, and it's black and white, it's grainy, but then all of a sudden he just glows intensely bright, like to the point where it washes out like half the photos, collapses to the ground, and when you can see again, there's this smoking pile. It doesn't have a whole lot of detail because it's a very cheap camera, but just smoking pile on the ground, and the guy in the car just books it out of there. So again, not a high level of fidelity. So the guy in the car could have done something to him. It doesn't look like it, but this is the closest thing I've been able to find to video evidence of someone spontaneously combusting.
I didn't watch it with the sound, but the fact that the guy just like instantly drove off, I found very hilarious.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily want to be around to try and explain why there's a dead cop or what's left of a dead cop on the road. But yeah, so
it's a wild video. I mean, it definitely seems like something that could easily be, you know, created, especially in this day and age.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting idea. Just the concept of how that happened actually might fit into some of our theories later. So
I was expecting the person in the car to be the one that caught on fire, not the
right. So was I when I first stumbled across it.
I was like watching that one. It's like, oh no, that's
turns out it's an M. Night Shyamalan film.
Right.
But
no, that's interesting. I haven't seen that before.
Yeah, and that's the only even remotely credible, and I stretch that term to the extreme, but the only remotely credible footage I've been able to find of this actually happening in real time. Make of it what you will if you decide to go looking for it. So does that bring us to theories as to how this might happen?
I had a couple other ones here I'll just throw in for you too. I knew I didn't have a lot of time to research for this one, so I tried to specifically search for instances where this has happened with witnesses only.
Okay.
And because I figured if they're by themselves, then whatever. I mean, and I didn't find many. You actually listed a couple already that I hadn't seen in my search that I found. I found this one that said this article claimed that this was the only spontaneous combustion that had a witness. So obviously that is not true. But this is, I believe, let me see here. This one was a guy who saw somebody burning out of the corner of his eye, it says, basically, and the lady who was burning like gave no indication whatsoever that she was burning. Like she just sat there quietly, no screams, no pain, no nothing.
Oof.
And he tried to put out the fire and it burned his hands in so doing. She lived, it says, through the combustion and then went into a coma at the hospital and died afterwards. So that was one instance. And then the other one, I did find a video on YouTube, which honestly looked like it could have been acted like it's just like a low budget hoax. But it was on the only reason I'm giving this any credence is it was on the Science Channel, which I was not familiar with. So I looked into that a bit more, and apparently it is actually sponsored and owned by Discovery. So, but it's two guys on couches, and the guy's name is Frank Baker, and he in the reenactment, I guess, if you will, of what happened, was basically sitting on one couch. His friend is at like a 90-degree other couch that's talking. They're talking about some fishing tournament they're going to go to, and then this Frank guy just bursts into flames on like the right side of his body, and his friend gets up and like he throws a glass of water on him actually that was like on the table, and then he's like using like I don't know what he had. It wasn't a pillow, but some kind of cloth material that was nearby that he was like trying to like smother the flames out with, and they managed to get the fire out, and they went to the hospital. Basically the doctor said that he had never seen anything like it before, but he could confirm that the flames had come from the inside out, essentially, in the case. He said he had never seen anything like it before. But that's really the only other ones I saw that were with a witness, because I'm kind of more curious who's seeing this happening.
Yeah, I checked down the video you're talking about, and yeah, it's a reenactment, certainly of the guy catching on fire. But yeah, it gets the point across at least. But yeah, that one I hadn't stumbled across myself. So interesting.
I had a story here that I think actually might be a more detailed version of the first one that you mentioned, Cody.
Okay.
Because I heard there was more detail on the one on what I'm looking at here, and that sounds like the same thing. But this is the story of Jeannie Saffin, a British woman who died in 1982, and she was at home with her father, and apparently. Now, it's not clear here. So is the guy, the father and his, okay, no, her brother-in-law. Okay. I was going to say, because it said like the son-in-law, but it didn't say whether they were married or not. But it's her brother-in-law. Anyways, say that they were in the home, and the father like had his attention like drawn to the daughter, and she was just like sitting in a chair on fire. And like you say, she was not like screaming or like panicking in any sense. They like managed to put out the flames using water from the kitchen. But what was crazy about this story is that both the father and the brother-in-law both stated that Jeannie had flames coming from her mouth as if she was breathing fire, and they actually stated that the fire made like a roaring sound, like a furnace. Oof. So like a forced air kind of flame sound, not just like a crackling campfire kind of thing.
Polonius Forstius is back, baby.
So yes, and she apparently survived the fire, but then went into a coma and died from an infection in her lungs.
Well, I do think we should also mention a few cases, because a lot of these we've talked about have been people, very much either sequestered or like in a stationary position where this has happened. But where there might have been something around like candle or a fireplace or something that could have sparked them, to ignite. I do want to talk about a few cases I stumbled across where people were in vehicles when they burst into flames. Starting with the case of John Greeley, a helmsman of a ship, actually, the SS Ulrich. So in April of 1938, he was, steering the ship towards England, and the second mate noticed that it was beginning to like drift off course. So he runs to the wheelhouse to see what's going on, and he finds John, or what's left of him, burned to a crisp at the wheel. The wheel itself, the compass, and the deck, which I guess was made of wood, were untouched. So I can't think of anything that would be unless he was smoking at the time. I can't think of anything that would be terribly flammable on a deck. And this is clearly a case where there wasn't a span of 3 to 4 hours to burn someone to a crisp. It happened in a pretty short span of time. A few others, George Turner, a truck driver, also in Britain, oddly enough. He basically, his vehicle stopped, rolled into a ditch. He was later found, burned to a crisp, and nothing else inside the truck was burnt. Not the upholstery, not the dash, nothing. And similarly with a guy named William Bruick, who was also behind his vehicle when he was in Holland, I believe, where he just seemed to burst into flames, was found later just a charred husk, and no plausible explanation. So it does lend credence to the idea that this can happen fairly quickly, and not just for someone left alone, or to burn over a long span of time, but for all of a sudden to be there and then just gone in a matter of moments, which is also rather shocking, I think. So do we want to talk about any other notable cases, or kind of get into I use the term explanations broadly, but do we want to start talking about what might be causing this?
I was just checking around here. I don't see too much else. You might already mention this one. The guy in the doorway. Did you already mention this one?
Oh, was he the one in
it's like
in Serbia? A homeless man in Serbia burst into flames from the inside out. Also been drinking.
I actually don't know where this is at. It doesn't say.
Oh.
I don't know. There's a image of the guy like who's all on fire in his stomach.
Ooh.
But it does not actually say where this is from. But website's the Mirror, so that's England, UK. So I don't know if it's there, but who knows if it's there or not. But
yeah,
I'll send the picture over just so we have that one as well. But yeah, I don't really have anything else.
Oh, I think I see. I did a search thinking it was the guy from Serbia. Let me see if it matches up to what you're talking about. Because I think this is the one I saw before. There's like a bike next to him, kind of, and he's sitting in a doorway, and his middle is sort of on fire.
His middle is definitely on fire. I don't see a bike. Oh, there's a bike in the bottom picture. Yeah.
Okay. See, I think we're looking at the same one.
Incident apparently ended without serious injury to the victim. How is that possible based on this photo?
That's a very good question.
His life may not have been a state, but.
Well, I do seem to remember seeing a couple of accounts from people who survived this, and basically saying that the people who were around at the time, or even they themselves, said that there was no heat from the flames. That's clearly not the case in all of them, but I do remember stumbling across a case or two like that. I don't remember exact names, but that has cropped up in a few of these.
I did find one more line in my notes here. I don't know where I took this from, but it said a fireman reported seeing a slit in a man's abdomen from which blue flames were issuing.
Whoa.
I'd heard that as well somewhere.
Yeah, I don't even know where that's from, but
like that exact phrasing.
Oh man. And there is oftentimes in these cases there is mention that when people see them or walk in while it's happening, that the flames are an odd color, often blue, but sometimes the color isn't mentioned, but when it is, it usually seems to be mentioned as being blue. Which actually, I'm going to look up something real quick here. I'm going to end up on so many watch lists. Because I think, and I seem to remember this from chemistry class, I think body fat does burn blue. I think, which ties into one of the explanations for this. But
While Justin's
for
looking that up, I did. This is on a Gizmondo article with 10 cases here. There is one fun one where spontaneous combustion won a court case where a woman had burst, basically, I mean, textbook what we're talking about, and they put her husband basically as a murder perpetrator for this, and he basically used spontaneous combustion defense and was exonerated from his wife's death. So
Whoa.
there is that one. And then there's the flip side here where another guy claimed that he, what did he do here? He sued a manufacturer of his hot water heater for $3 million after he was hospitalized with severe burns, and lost the case, but then afterward changed his story and said he fell asleep and woke up to being spontaneously combusted, where he then sold his story to make money off of it. So apparently it has both won and lost a court case. So
Interesting. Yeah, I wasn't able to find anything definitive, but I seem to remember that if fatty tissue does burn blue, at least some types of fat. So with that said, should we start with one of the more plausible theories, or should we just go start at the least plausible and work our way to it? What are your druthers, guys?
jump into it. I don't know how many we got here. I mean,
I've got a few.
okay.
Since it's topical, let's start with one of the more plausible ones, like the most commonly accepted theory. So body fat, as we mentioned, could play a factor in this. And early on, we did say that, according to at least early research, a lot of the people that were victims of this were overweight and did drink a lot. So that would provide a lot of fuel for fire if a fire did start. And the morbid and yet seemingly plausible extension of that is something called the wick effect, where the idea is that if someone is knocked out and they catch on fire and they're unable to put it out, the heat from the fire will eventually liquefy their body fat, and their clothing will act the same way that a candle wick does, and essentially keep the fire going without being consumed itself, and keep going until that fuel is burnt out, and then for some reason not spread beyond that point, despite reaching temperatures that can apparently powderize bone. So this is one of the most commonly accepted theories for what causes spontaneous combustion. There are, of course, some issues with it. The heat and the lack of spreading, for one thing. The fact that the fire wouldn't just continue to burn the clothing after after it used up all the fat also seems bizarre. And you see that in some cases where the clothing survives. Why it wouldn't continue to burn stuff around them. So this raises questions, but it is the most commonly accepted theory among medical professionals and chemists and things.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think about this one?
I think it's gross. That's what I think.
Should we put a content warning on this before we make it live?
Oh, yeah, I've heard that. Like I was familiar with this theory as well, and it's just there's something about this that's like really just the idea of your body just like melting, and then that is a fuel source. It like logically makes some sense, that just like a candle, the wick of a candle doesn't actually burn. It's the wax on it that's burning, and the wick sucks up the wax into itself as it liquefies, and so the wick isn't actually really burning, or it's burning much slower than it would naturally. But yeah, it just falls into just all the same problems with like, why is it not spreading? Just like you said, it like once it gets down and like all the body fats go on, which obviously that even has flaws, because like it's not all your body fat's not on one place. It's not going to like move towards the fire and just like keep getting like, it's eventually going to like reach a point where the area that's on fire is going to run out of fat fuel, and then How does it get somewhere else? I don't know. Apparently, it moves on and like does it again. I don't know, because that's the only way they have to work it to like burn up a whole body like that. And I also saw somewhere where like an animal fat fueled fire is one of the coolest burning fires that you can have. Like I actually tried to look this up, and there was like some conflicting information. So these numbers might be a little bit off, but like for example, like a standard wood fire typically burns at like 1800 degrees Fahrenheit. Like a charcoal fire can get higher, like about 2000. Animal fat is about 1500. And then just by comparison, like a blowtorch, like a controlled gas air mixture fire is like 3000. But like an animal fat fueled fire just barely even reaches the temperature required to even cremate a body in the first place, let alone explain how it like burns just the body and nothing else. So while it makes sense logically as a way for it to happen, I don't see how it could really work that well. It would also seemingly take much longer. Like you think about how long a candle burns. Like imagine a candle the size of your body. That would take years to burn. So
yeah, this one has, I think, some things that make sense, like Brett said, but I guess too far removed from science, period. But I guess like the idea of if you're getting down to the bottom of the body to where the flames would be licking the floor, essentially at that point, like I don't understand how more environments wouldn't have had damage from this one, because it doesn't, I mean, think of how many, so this is, near as I can tell, 200 cases of this in the last 300 years kept popping up on websites. But think of like how many houses are burned every year from like a candle that tips over or catches something on fire. And like, I don't know, it just seems like all of these places would have went up in smoke if somebody had been burned alive like that. So it doesn't quite line up, but there's something to maybe like the fat burning, but I don't know. It doesn't fully make sense on this one.
Okay. Yeah, I do agree. It seems like on the surface, it seems plausible, sensible. Like, oh, it's just a horrible accident, where it's just a horrible macabre version of a candle, and people, that's the explanation. But there are, to me at least, and to you guys, it seems, so many pieces that just don't fit. But we'll see what we think of some of the other ones.
Not to mention too, like when you burn a candle and the candle is done, like you're usually left with like a little pool of wax, but like by the end of it, the wick is gone. So for any of these cases where you're saying like the clothes are somehow left, but the body is gone, like I really don't see how that could be the case.
Yeah, it seems backwards.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah. So yeah, this one, well, we'll get to what our opinions on what the right one is, the right one or the most plausible explanation is, but I don't think this is it for me. So in no particular order, let's go down the list I've got. I just wrote these down as I came across them. So the next one up is a foul play, where these people weren't actually burned in these spots at all. They were murdered and burned somewhere else, and somebody brought their remains to the area where they were found, which explains why nothing around them was burnt. They get weirder from here, but what do you guys think of this one?
No.
I don't. Yeah, I think it's just a hard no. Although, it actually does seem more scientifically possible than an open fire, sitting somewhere in a house, not catching other things on fire.
If they could trace like I mean, you would think forensically they could even go so far as to do something as simple as like identifying this tiny charred piece of rib as like the top of your rib cage and this tiny as the bottom of your rib cage. And if they're not laying on top of each other as they should be, then somebody probably moved the body. But I mean,
That's a good point.
Also,
I don't know about that one.
Also, yeah, it would require like, unless this is the same guy who's been around for centuries doing this to random people he doesn't like, it would require multiple murderers to be carting around like, I don't know, garbage bags full of burnt human remains.
I can get you a portable incinerator real cheap. Direct you to a website.
But yeah, breaking into people's houses or apartments and doing this without being noticed by anyone. Yeah, this I don't buy into this one at all, and sadly, it's not the least plausible one we're going to get to.
All right.
So next in what I wrote down is the idea that methane in the gut builds up to an extent where it's at the right concentration to so that somehow something in the environment sets off a spark or provides an ignition source, and that burns up the rest of the body, either static electricity or smoke inhalation, or if someone's smoking a cigarette or a pipe, but something provides an ignition for all of this methane that's built up inside them and burns them to a crisp. I would like to point out that methane does burn at a higher temperature. In open air, it burns at what I'm seeing here over 1900 degrees Celsius, which is significantly hotter in Fahrenheit.
Yeah, that's very hot.
Yeah. But again, I'll take point on this one. That does also necessitate the right combination, the right density in the air. Like if it's too high, it won't ignite at all. If it's too low, it won't reach that temperature. And then it also raises the question of, again, why doesn't other things burst into flames because of all this heat? So what do you guys think of this one?
I had this one on my list as well. I think the one big thing it has going for it is that it explains how fire would be coming from the inside out.
Yeah.
Having those fuels already inside the body, obviously if they caught on fire, that's where it would start and it would then come out somehow. I think the biggest problem with this idea is that like you would have to have like a shitload of methane, no pun intended, a fart load of methane in your body for it to burn long enough to consume your body, because to my knowledge, gases like that burn up pretty quick. Like if you don't have like a large source of it, like they just kind of like oop, and they're done. Mm-hmm. So I don't see how that would be, although like most of these are reported to have happened like very quickly. I mean, there's that going forward, like in a matter of minutes. So it's definitely a possibility. I would give it like a more, it's more plausible than the other two we've mentioned so far, I think.
Yeah, I think for me, this one probably can't be true just based on how many man weekends we've had and no one having burst spontaneously. But it does bring up a bigger point to me, which Brett just hit on, which I wrote in my notes here, is there's some confusion, I think, in this process over whether this is a fast burn or a slow burn also. Whereas like it seems like some of these bodies are saying were like smoldering in a closed apartment for a very long time until someone found them, and other ones just seem to be like a flash and then they were gone. I mean, look, if that picture or that video you showed us at all could be accurate, like that kind of demonstrates the other version was like guy, boom, dust and ashes, right? So I don't know. This one could be truer, I guess. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know where this one ranks compared to the wick effect for me, but it does, like Brett said, it does explain kind of the inside out burns, which I guess is part of the problem here as well. So it's possible, I guess.
yeah, my main thing with this one is the fuel to air mixture, for lack of a better term. That seems to be the biggest sticking point for me. I mean, aside from, well, like you said, having that much methane inside you to begin with, and B, having it burn for that long and being the right consistency of the entire time, maybe. But and it should be noted, methane does have kind of a bluish tint when it burns, so there's that for what it's worth. But I don't know it. Yeah,
I was just gonna say too. I was thinking on these, like, I triple checked my research here, but essentially with some very rare, like, noble gas fires that you can have, specifically, like, you have to have some oxygen for any of these to be possible. But I was just thinking, like, if you were in an enclosed house and it was somebody who hadn't been out for a couple of days and nobody had checked them for a couple of days, like, I could potentially see, like, the oxygen content being lower in that type of atmosphere, which, would create a lower burn as well, because you can kind of replicate that a little bit with, like, a fire when you're, manipulating a campfire or something. But it also makes me wonder, like, why would so many of these cases be inside versus outside then? Because you would think, like, with the oxygen content outside, there should be more of these spontaneous things happening outside.
Yeah. I other than, like, in your blood, man, I don't know, I'm not a biologist, but to my knowledge, like, there isn't a high concentration of oxygen inside your body other than, like, inside your lungs and in your blood. It, like, wouldn't be in your stomach where the methane would be.
True. Yeah. So a little more plausible than some of these, I think. But yeah, I do still think we're missing a piece of the puzzle. So let's go to where it was. Okay, there we were. We talked about the wick effect. So all right, next one I've got on my list is some sort of disease that raises the body's temperature to such an extent that it's like a super fever, and that causes your cells to just ignite.
That can't be true. I don't think.
I don't think so either.
What's the highest fever somebody can get? Like 120, you're dead. I mean, what's
right? Yeah, you would not. I mean, that at least that would the one part of that would make sense is that if your body got hot enough to combust in that way, then yeah, you would have died before then, and that's why you would not be putting yourself out.
Yeah, that's, I think, the only part that seems plausible too.
The people that had a 400-degree fever and then they tried Dayquil and the alcohol content.
Well, beyond all that, like, how would such a disease even propagate? If it so bursts into flames before they can affect anyone else.
That's a good point.
Once every 1.5 years on average here, so I don't know.
So yeah, I think we're all in agreement. Probably not this one.
Probably not that one.
Probably not that one, though.
Okay. Going to another potentially plausible one. This one I stumbled across is one of the more recent theories put forth by a biologist by the name of Dr. Brian J. Thorpe, who posits that elevated levels of acetone in the body could, due to some condition or another, that would cause them to increase, because the human body does naturally have some some level of acetone in it, usually a harmless amount. But if some imbalance caused it to increase, then an outside catalyst, again, static electricity from, he said something as innocuous as brushing your hair or taking off a shirt could spark enough of a reaction that could cause someone to burst into flames. This is the most recent scientific explanation I've been able to find. What do you guys think of it?
I'd heard about this one a little bit, and I just to expound on it a little. I believe acetone can build up if your body is in a like a starvation state. It's like if you're under eating, like somehow your body then produces more acetone. Okay. I don't. Don't cite me on that, exactly. But I believe that's what I remember from that.
Okay.
Which
this guy. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
well, it just occurred to me, like we were talking about a lot of these cases, the person is overweight, and that doesn't seem like that it goes hand in hand real well.
Yeah. Unless they're all doing starvation diets or something, but
well, yeah, I came across this guy as well who was like, "No, the wick effect is not correct," and then
yeah, he's vehemently against it.
He is, yeah. So then he was talking about the occurring acetones, and I had written down like basically he's saying like we have nail polish everywhere because our body naturally produces it on our skin, our clothes, our breath. So even this tiniest little spark could cause fire here, I guess is his theory of static electricity or a cigarette or whatever. But it does say you could have raised levels of acetone also if you are diabetic. So if you're not to link overweight people necessarily to diabetes, but there is some correlation there, I think. So maybe.
Yeah, I think acetone also burns hotter than typical fire as well.
I think so. The flame is bluish. I did look that up. Let me see what the temperature
Where's Micah
is.
when we need it? Doesn't he do this for a living?
Let's see.
Put shit out, maybe that's better.
I've got acetylene, which is not exactly the same thing. That burns at about 2400 degrees Celsius in just open air. So I don't know exactly the chemical composition difference between that and acetone, but I on this table of flame temperatures from various fuels, that's the closest I've been able to find. So I personally, I think this one seems intriguing, if nothing else, because you do have an actual scientist, someone who does have a PhD, to the best of my knowledge, putting forth something that he thinks makes sense, and that at least to a layman like me seems like it might be plausible. That's all I'm going to say about it for right now, but. Yeah, this one intrigued me when I stumbled across it. And if we're done with that, then brings me to one that I feel very, very differently about.
Okay.
So have you guys heard about pyrotons?
No.
That what turns you into a Jedi?
Yeah, I mean, it may as well for all the scientific acumen behind it. So these are subatomic particles hypothesized, and I use that with the biggest air quotes imaginable, by a man named, I don't know if this guy was a doctor, I hope not, a man named Larry E. Arnold, who in his 400-page book, Ablaze, with an exclamation point at the end, hypothesized that there are these subatomic particles that have been hitherto undiscovered, that have no evidence supporting their existence or seemingly other interaction with the world other than setting people on fire, that somehow interact with the body's cells and create miniature nuclear explosions that set people on fire, somehow like hyper accelerating the mitochondrial energy production of the cell to the point where you burst into flames. So Parasite Eve, basically.
That's it.
That's it. I'm not spending $60 to buy a used copy of a 30-year-old book that is full of this sort of nonsense to read any further into it.
There's probably one at the library.
I checked.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I found 2 books that covered the subject at all, and yeah, neither of them mentioned this. So,
I mean, the idea that there's something, a particle out there that we haven't discovered. I mean, it certainly is possible because we don't know everything yet, but I don't know that it just seems really implausible that there's just this undiscovered thing that's causing it. But the overlying theory of like the subatomic like fission/fusion of molecules, I don't support the idea, but the one thing I do like about it is that it certainly would generate a shitload of energy, and that could be fast enough and have enough energy to like burn shit out real quick. Beyond that, I don't really like it.
I'm not going to give this one any credence, but I was still researching the last one in the background here. And boy, I wish I knew my science better, but looking up alkynes and ketones and acetone and all these other things here. But back to the acetone ones, not to take us back a step here, but if there's a way to convert it to the other one, which is to like the acetylene, yeah, then based on air temperature of the flame, somebody else in a different thing I'm looking at here said it's basically the same temperature as lava at that point, in which case it says you'd only, if it happened, you'd only survive 4 to 5 seconds. So the idea that like you could burn out in 4 to 5 seconds is definitely intriguing.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know the scientific connection to make this, so I don't know if that's even a possibility, but it's interesting. No nuclear reactions in the body.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this one seems like hypothesizing, again, giant air quotes, that people go missing in the woods because unicorns are eating them. I mean, yeah, it's an explanation. It's not a good one, and there's nothing to support it. So yeah, this is just the fact that this guy got his book published is astounding to me. But yeah, I don't think this one holds any weight. This brings me to the last one I've got. So, ball lightning. A bit of an inside joke for
I don't know if you're joking right now or not.
No, this is one I've seen that's been posted as an idea that ball lightning happens, ends up in the area where these people are, touches them, or otherwise gets hot enough to ignite them into flames, and then just disappears.
So the lightning goes into them and then burns them,
or is near enough that the heat sets, it just being in proximity sets them on fire. There have been varying accounts. I use that term loosely as well. But yeah, basically ball lightning comes in through a window or phases through the wall or something and sets them on fire. I'm not making this up.
No, I do think I did see that on some webpage somewhere, but I guess I don't even know. I mean, if you got struck by lightning, then that could do some severe damage to you, right?
Yeah, but it'll also generally like throw you across the room. Even people who get electrocuted from sockets usually get knocked back, and a lightning bolt has a hell of a lot more charge than that.
And electrical burns are a hell of a lot different than open flame burns.
Yeah.
Yes. But
I don't think
by that token, ball lightning is different than regular lightning, so maybe it just sits there and charges you to death.
That's true. It plays more. Play ball. I don't think this can possibly be it either.
Okay.
Brett, any comments on that one?
No.
All right. I do have a couple others here, Justin, that you
go for it.
Perhaps purposefully glossed over so that we could see your point of view on this.
Okay.
Paranormal.
Like
full stop. That was listed on several pages. I don't even know what they mean by that. Like a ghost is trying to make you explode,
like coming from hell and setting people on fire because
that makes more sense, I guess.
I don't know.
Well, don't say sin, because that's the next one I have, which is divine intervention. That was listed on several web pages.
Yeah. Surprised that hasn't come up yet.
That's a tough one because can neither prove nor disprove that one. So that's there's that.
It seems very scattershot as to who this deity is deciding to
definitely does
burn to death.
Definitely does. They sacrifice one person a year. Yeah, I got nothing on either of those, but I do have one more yet on top of all that.
Aliens.
No, it's sort of, but no. Hear me out on this one. Could it be caused by Joe Janka? We haven't seen him in 11 weeks. Who knows where he's at?
Who knows what fiery rage his employment condition has reached at this point?
Exactly. Exactly. Brett, do you have any other theories?
Uh nothing. Everything that I had on my list here as possible theory, we've basically gone over. Um, the only thing I guess I could throw it in now is that, and I don't have any kind of real idea like to back this up, or it's like how it could. And it obviously is. I don't think it's really possible at all. But whatever is causing this, I feel has to be some sort of like it's contained somehow. Like that's the only thing that makes any sense to me logically. And so like it's it's like something like in a force field, like that, like all the nearly all the heat is like trapped in this thing, the shape of like the size of your torso, basically. I don't understand how it doesn't spread to things in the room. Um, and so I like this working theory that has like no evidence or anything behind it. Um, it like some sort of little wormhole that like opens up this cosmic energy, like a wormhole directly into the center of the sun. How about that?
Showers you with pyrotons.
That's right. Like I don't.
Okay.
I like I say I've no. It's not a real theory. It's just like something that passed through my head. Like maybe this is what's causing it. Because when it comes down to it, the thing that stops all of these theories from working is the fact that the fire barely spreads, and I just cannot wrap my head around that. And then you got some cases where like it was reported that like a stack of paper next to the body was fine, and
Yeah.
in the next room over, a part of the TV had melted. And like, wait, what? what the hell is that? Like, and I mean, obviously, it's possible that there's cases where like a house burned down, and it was because the fire had actually spread in that case. Maybe we just aren't aware of the ones that spread. But like I say, we have photographic evidence of so many of these, and it's always the same thing. And like the super creepy and weird thing is like many of these, there's body parts left, like legs typically. Like the fire doesn't go below their knees and it just stops. Like that like kind of like really it's just this idea of like the fire being encapsulated, something that kind of like just the epitome of it there. I don't know.
Yeah, so quite a bit that said like the extremities just didn't have the fat, to sustain the fire there, or spread the fire there, so you get to like the bony parts of the body, and there wasn't anything there. Did you see the one case that said afterwards they found a like extremely the skull had shrunken down to like an extremely small size? I was like, what the fuck is that?
I came across that one as well. Yeah.
The most plausible explanation I heard for that is that it wasn't the whole skull. It was just, the rest of it had burnt away, and that was just sort of like a knot of flesh at the brainstem, kind of, that for some reason hadn't burnt, but everything else had, rather than the entire skull was just going,
It's a tough one just because, again, like we've seen some other cases, but like the cases are similar. They're all similar, but they are all too different from each other as well, to like find that one magic bullet that's gonna be the solution to all of these. Did anybody watch the Tobe Hooper movie Spontaneous Combustion from the 80s?
No,
I didn't know that was a thing.
Well, there's your tomorrow night activity. I didn't watch it, but I just saw that as a thing. So
I've probably seen worse films, so
I'm sure. Yeah, probably.
But yeah, so if we've exhausted all the possible explanations we found, do we want to talk about which one we think is the most plausible for like all out of all of them? Okay.
Joe Janko. The real culprit is right here on my screen, if you can tell what that is.
Flame Man?
That's what I was gonna say. That's from Mega Man.
It is, yeah.
It took me a second at first, but then it's like, oh, okay, I recognize this, right? Yeah, I'll take points on this one, I guess. Personally, as with a lot of these that we cover, there's some really outlandish and frankly stupid explanations for this. I'm surprised I didn't come across aliens during any part. At least, like a consistent, it's an alien weapon that they're testing out or whatever.
Really hot anal probe.
If you're into it.
Gotta go far enough up that it gets to the torso, though. Just get to the middle of the stomach if you can.
But at the same time, there's an interesting mix. Like there's some pseudoscientific ones. There's ones from actual, legitimate scientific people who, doctors who are trying to figure this out. And of those, I think the one I find most plausible is the acetone idea. It would have to be, of course, I would imagine, like very specific physical conditions that would produce that level of acetone, where it could ignite just from static or whatever. But it would explain the cases that happen when there's no outside source of flame or anything. It would explain just why it happens when people. Well, I mean, it would explain a lot, actually. People who are smoking, obviously, there's a easy way for the excess acetone to ignite. It would also explain why this is so infrequent, because I got to imagine that's a pretty rare condition to generate that level of flammable material from your body. So if it's like 1 in, I don't know, 30 million people that ends up developing this, and only a small subset of them actually has the conditions to burst into flames, that would maybe go a ways towards explaining why we don't see more of this. It might also explain why we don't see this in animals. Like, I'm not sure about what the acetone content is in, say, like a cow or, it's something like that. But if it's just something specific to humans, like we produce more of it than, or we have conditions where we can produce that level of it and other animals don't, that could also explain one of the bigger questions that I stumbled across, which is why is this only happen to people? So I don't know. I think this one, it doesn't explain everything, but it goes the furthest distance towards making this at all sensible. So Dr. Brian J. Thorpe, you have my vote. I think you're the closest to being right on this. What about you guys?
I found his name is Brian Ford, so it disturbs me that you have a different last name than I do for that.
Really?
Yeah,
well, that's the internet for you.
Interesting.
But
sounds plausible, maybe
Dr.
not.
Brian, yeah.
Dr. Brian. I don't even know where to go with this one. There's just problems all over the place with this. It's interesting too, because I keep a spreadsheet of all of our episodes here, and this is now the second episode after the Barkley marathons that I just don't know how to categorize this topic. It's not really true crime. It's not really supernatural. It's not crypto. It's just a thing that's there that exists, or does it? I don't know. Oh man. I don't think any of these do a great job of explaining this, and that disturbs me the most about it. I think if it's happening, and there seems to be enough evidence, if you will, that there is, then it has to be some sort of ridiculously rare event that has some weird combination of conditions that happens. I mean, what we say once every 1.5 years that we know of. Although Brett, you brought up a good point. Like maybe if the things have burned down, then maybe we don't know about all the cases, which is possible too. But
right,
I have no idea what this could possibly be. Anything involving like alcohol, that doesn't make sense to me. So then I guess I'm down to like the acetone theory, or I mean, I guess methane could be a case, but that would seem to blow itself out really fast to me instead of a slow burn. So I guess I'm going to also go for the acetone, although I'm disturbed by the fact that this guy said, like, we basically get it everywhere, our skin and our clothes and everything. And I'm like, am I covered in it right now? Am I going to burst into flames? Probably not, because not many people do, but you never know.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'll go with that one, although I don't really like it, but I guess I'll go with that one.
Okay.
I mean, honestly, the ones we've talked about, I would have to go with that as well, or that and a combination of the methane hydrogen digestive gases theory. It could be both at the same time, and that's what makes it so rare. Um, it I think it has to be something inside the body. So it is a chemical or gas that we have in us. That's the only way that makes sense for us to be combusting ourselves rather than an external source just like falling on us. It you know it still requires some sort of ignition source though, like a spark or a a static charge or something, which not all of these cases seem to have a good source of where it would have come from. So it may not explain all of those, but um it's the only one that makes the most sense out of the ones that we've talked about, though it still it still doesn't answer all the questions. And like I'm in this weird zone where I feel like there's enough evidence and things that we have documented that I am I would say overwhelmingly in belief that it's a thing that happens, like not 100%, but a lot more than 50%. Like it's not a coin flip. I believe it's actually happening, but I have like as I said before, just the fact that the fires don't spread. Everything that we know about fire, which we've been studying for thousands of years, would lead us to believe that a fire that's hot enough to cremate a body would have to ignite other things in the room. It just would have to, unless something beyond our knowledge is happening, which is honestly the way I'm leaning, but it's beyond our knowledge, so I don't know how to classify that. But I am in belief that this is a thing that's happening.
Okay. So 2 acetones, 1 not sure. We're more in agreement than we are on these a lot of the time.
We could call an acetone. Although, if you think about like somebody that could fart for the methane theory, then maybe that's your acetone.
Oh, look at the time.
It's a low rumble. That's the tone.
Well, they mentioned the roaring from that one person, so maybe it wasn't coming from her mouth. Well, I'm glad we had a bit of a lighter-hearted ending to a pretty grim and grisly subject there. So I guess have we been ending these with the rants, or are we going back to the song? It's been a while since I've been on one of these.
I didn't do either, but it was just me here alone.
Well, you seem like you. Well, get it off your chest, Cody. 20 seconds to rant about doing this, shouldering this burden on your own.
All right. Well, I was here entirely alone for part of it while my family was on vacation, and I was left with nothing but a TV and a Nintendo 64 and GoldenEye, Justin. And I proceeded to play through GoldenEye time and time and time again, losing over and over and over, trying to figure out controls over and over and over, going from second difficulty down to first difficulty because I was that bad. Yes.
All right. But what if the controller bursts into flames?
That's the best part, Justin. You see, after the fabled expansion pack and the Rumble pack and the memory card pack you could buy, they later had the Spontaneous Combustion pack that you could use, which simulated when you used the rocket launcher in the game, the controller actually burst into flames in your hand, chopping off the top 2 feet of your body and guaranteed to make you a real-life odd job.
Amazing.
And leaving your legs suspiciously intact.
Yeah. What if odd job was like 4 feet of legs and only 1 foot above that? Be like,
we'll leave you with that lovely mental image, folks. Hope you enjoyed your time here with us tonight. And
yeah.
until next time, this is Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing, signing off.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.